Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon and for joining the Prince George's County Work Towards Furthering Housing Opportunity webinar. We have a stellar panel of participants with us today. My name is Aspasia Xipolia. I'm the director of DHCD in Prince George's County, and I will take us through the panel discussion today. A little bit of housekeeping. As a starting point, I'm going to ask all of our participants, who you probably already know, to tell us just a little bit about themselves, who they are, what the organization or company they represent, and more importantly, why it is that they do the kind of work they do every day. And then we're going to go through the presentations. We will start with DCA Rogers, and after she finishes her presentation, we're going to take a couple of questions because she has to leave us in about an hour to go to her next meeting. After the questions, we will go through everybody else's presentations, and then we will have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. So any questions you have, please put them in the chat. I will do my best to ask our panelists as many of your questions as possible. But if we don't get a chance to engage today and answer all of your questions, we will have the transcript and we will reach back out to continue discussing after this webinar. So without anything else, I would like to ask our panelists to tell us who they are and why they do what they do every day. And I will start with DCA Rogers.
Good afternoon, everyone, and so great to be here with you. Apologies, I have a cough drop in my mouth. I am getting over a cold, and so I want to make it through this without coughing. So I'm the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Economic Development for Prince George's County. And I do this work because at the core, I want to make sure that we are providing the same opportunities to households across a range of incomes and race and backgrounds, to have the same opportunities to live in quality housing near their jobs and near quality amenities.
Thank you. Latoya Thomas.
Good afternoon. I'm Latoya Thomas, principal and founder of Brick and Story. I am also the consultant working with HAN, the Housing Association of Nonprofit Developers, on the Housing Indicator Tool, which is what I'll be speaking about today. I do what I do because I believe that there's a really deep connection, obviously, between people and the built environment space. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to think about how we reshape our built environment through a more public-informed process that's more meaningful and more accessible for a diverse range of people to be able to participate and impact what their future landscapes look like. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Melissa Bondi.
Thank you so much for including me in this panel, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Melissa Bondi. I'm a policy director at Enterprise Community Partners here in the Mid-Atlantic region. You're going to hear similar themes, it sounds like, from some of our panelists. I do this work because I believe that investing equitably in people is the most important and effective way to support our collective health, well-being, and our prosperity. And that includes addressing systems of inequity, which affects the choices we make on those investments. And those are some of the hardest and most important ways that we can help to meet those goals. So that's why I do the work I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Pam Wilson.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pam Wilson. I'm the Chief Housing Development Manager for the Prince George's County Department of Housing and Community Development. I have over 30 years of experience with the department, serving in a variety of roles over the year. I really enjoy my job, and I do this work because I understand the importance and the value in providing quality, affordable housing to families and individuals. Housing stability contributes to so much, to healthier lives, to better education, and even wealth building opportunities. So I'm happy to be serving on the panel today. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Pam. And last but not least, John Maneval.
Hi, good afternoon. John Manival, principal of Oculus CAS, a consulting company that does work with Prince George's County DHCD. I echo a lot of what Pam just said. I really believe that what we do is so important because an affordable, quality home is absolutely critical for families to create supportive environments that are safe, healthy, and offer opportunities for success and wealth building.
Great, thank you, John. So without further ado, we will turn the mic to DCA Rogers to take us through her presentation.
Thank you, Director Zapolia. Getting it up here, okay. As I said, I am Angie Rogers. I am the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Economic Development in Prince George's County. And I have the privilege of serving in County Executive Angela Also Brooks' administration, which has really been, I think, one of the most forward-thinking administrations as it relates to affordable housing, really in Prince George's County's history. It is my job, as I like to say, to translate our 498 square miles, that is bigger than New York and all the boroughs, into meaningful economic development. And that means attracting jobs to the county, developing the kinds of amenities that county residents want to see, and also housing. In June of 2021, County Executive Also Brooks set a new economic development platform for the county. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today in the role of affordable housing within that platform. Next slide. So it was really important to us to develop an economic development platform that was holistic and really guided by a set of goals that would indicate how we grow over time, how we direct our capacities and resources within the government, and also how we measure our progress. Next slide. So first we started to, kind of conceptualize, well, who is Prince George's County? What is Prince George's County? And in terms of our economic development platform, what is it that we are trying to communicate? Lots of folks think that the work of economic development, and certainly the work of traditional economic development, is really just about growing jobs, growing commercial taxes, and certainly that was part of our equation as we were setting this platform. But we also wanted a platform that was more holistic. So we want to be where the region lives and works, and not just a bedroom community for the DC Metro, where people are kind of laying their heads in Prince George's County, but working elsewhere. And we want to, push an economic base that is more sustainable. But we also want to make sure that as we grow jobs, and as we grow the number of people who are calling the county home, that we are preserving diversity. And part of that for us is a focus on affordable housing, making sure that as we grow, we are growing an economy that has room for a range of folks to exist within it. Next slide. So specifically, we were focused on making sure that we were preserving housing affordability as part of our overall economic development platform. County Executive Also Brooks said something during her State of the County address back in 2021 when she released the new economic development platform that we have been repeating ever since, which is that we cannot have quality economic development without affordable housing. So as we are, growing jobs in the healthcare sector or the tech sector, I use the example all the time that, we help to build a new hospital in downtown Largo. If, our housing market can only accommodate the doctors and the hospital administrators, then we make ourselves less competitive for having that business locate, grow, and thrive in our county. If the person who works the front desk at the hospital, or if the, phlebotomist has to drive from an hour away to get to that hospital, then it becomes less competitive for us to have it here. And so as we are growing commerce, growing jobs, growing amenities, we also have to make sure that our community can house all of the people that we're looking to work in those jobs. And so some people were surprised that we would set an affordable housing goal for Prince George's County, which in the eyes of some has a lot of naturally occurring affordable housing already. But the thing that we knew, and from some of the data that I think you're going to hear about later in this session, was that one, that affordable housing is disappearing and disappearing at a pretty fast clip in some of our communities. When we think about communities along the purple line, and we think about what the introduction, particularly of new transit options, often does in communities, it can start to squeeze prices. We know that, and we have started to see it already. What we know about housing that exists in the county already is that, particularly for some of our multifamily stock, and particularly inside the Beltway, it's older housing and it's not very good quality. And so we have these housing dynamics that said to us, as we were preparing an economic development platform that really directs how we grow, we really needed to pay attention to our affordable stock and make sure that we were preserving housing that was already affordable and increasing the quality of that housing. But we are also growing the number of affordable units that are available to us so that we can meet the growth that's coming. So we set this goal to preserve affordability and to diversify the county's housing stock. Next slide. Specifically, we set a goal to produce 26,000 new residential units by 2030, 75% of which would be affordable to households earning less than 120% of the area median. We set a goal also to support the preservation of 6,000 affordable residential units. And finally, we set a goal to increase the number of multifamily construction starts by 10,400 by 2030. That last one is important because if you know Prince George's County, one of the things that you know about it is that we have a lot of single family and townhome units. And one of the things we learned from our Housing Opportunities for All study and that process is that we needed to diversify the housing types that exist in the county to allow us to serve a broader range of household types. But also, this is an issue that helps us to address our affordability issues. Next slide. Before I talk about our anchor initiative for our economic development platform, I do want to just note that, setting a goal like we did, it turns out that that is a really good thing. It starts to set the stage for the kinds of programs and investments you need to meet those goals, and really helped us to start to make the case to build a toolkit in Prince George's County that would support our efforts. So in the last 2 years, I think we've seen the confirmation of a sustainable funding source for our Housing Investment Trust Fund. So making sure that we are going to have resources every year to feed into good projects in the county, which starts to feed the kind of predictability, which then helps particularly our nonprofit and affordable housing development community plan better for projects and to look at Prince George's County more for new projects. We use some of our ARPA funding to feed our burgeoning efforts on right of first refusal in the county. And then we were able to go and get state funding to leverage both of those tools, our Housing Investment Trust Fund and our right of first refusal. I mentioned ROFR. We implemented a program around our longstanding right of first refusal law that has preserved, I think, over 1,000 units just since last year. We attracted over $90 million in funding from Amazon's Housing Equity Fund to county projects. And finally, particularly as a result of having more predictable funding sources, we now have this growing pipeline of projects using these resources, plus our home funding, plus our housing pilots. We have this growing pipeline, so many that this spring, one of the county council staff caught me in the elevator and joked that we were sending so many deals down for their consideration that they were struggling to keep up. And they said, Angie, how many are coming? And I said, this is who we are now. We're doing deals and taking names. And so it has really been, I think, the result of us setting goals and setting an intention that we are going to grow tools and grow a pipeline that helps to meet the needs that we know are developing in the county. So I want to just give this last shout out to our Anchor initiative for our new economic development platform. If you haven't heard us talk yet about the Blue Line Corridor, I hope you'll tune in, because this is exciting stuff that's happening. The Blue Line Corridor, which runs from Capitol Heights Metro all the way out to what was Largo Town Center, is now downtown Largo, and including Central Avenue, Maryland 214, is our next big opportunity to focus on all of those goals, including our affordable housing goals, and really create a model for place-based development that we hope then we can replicate throughout the county. Next slide. We modeled our Blue Line Corridor, based on, or branded it based on sports and entertainment. It's a corridor that is anchored by FedEx Field. We also, the county has a huge focus on recreation and on youth sports, and a goal to become the youth sports capital of the country. And the Blue Line Corridor is really our opportunity to add some of those amenities that the entire county wants to see, and also meet our other economic development goals in the process while we are experiencing that growth. Next slide. Blue Line Corridor is also one of those places, like setting intention for our housing, that has paid off with new investments to the county. So is the Blue Line Corridor. Over the last two Maryland General Assembly sessions, we have been able to attract more than $460 million worth of state investment to support signature developments, infrastructure, place-based arts, to the Blue Line corridor, and we are happy to be in the process to start to push some of those projects along. Next slide. So all of this, is, our attempt to meet our vision for growing this diverse, dynamic, sustainable ecosystem of jobs, housing, and amenities that supports our goal to really be the economic engine, not just of the state, but also of the DC metro region. And so having all of these goals come together and directing our resources toward them helps us to feed that vision. The county executive uses the tagline, "Greatness grows here." And that's what our economic development platform and our economic development vision is meant to support. So with that, I'll turn it back to Director Zapovia for a few questions.
Great. Thank you very much for this presentation. Just a couple of questions, and there are many more coming through. I want to encourage everybody to keep typing their questions. And as I said at the beginning, if we cannot get to everybody, we will be following up. But as a starting point, DCA Rogers, as the person in the county that leads the county's economic development agencies, how do you see equity and racial justice frame the county's efforts?
Not just at the county level, but I hope for everyone, we see equity and racial justice at the center of everything that we do and the reason why we work. And I say that because particularly as a public sector employee, I specifically consider it my role to use our resources and use our capacity to help things happen that otherwise wouldn't. And what we know is, that we live in a country where all of the systems have really been based on and have been built from a perspective of inequity and to undermine racial justice. And so if we are going to turn that dynamic around in this country, in our county, in our region, then it is imperative for equity and racial justice to be at the center of everything that we do, so that it's not a side, activity or an afterthought, but it is actually the reason why we do the work that we do. So it is the reason why it is important to me to have affordable housing at the core of our economic development goals, because what we know is that, housing and affordability undermines particularly the ability of households of color to fully participate in our economic society, if you will. And so having tools that help those households compete more fully in the economic system that we have set up in this country is, for me, the reason why you wouldn't pursue growth without making sure that everybody can compete fully. So for me, it's at the center of everything. And it is the reason why we do this work. We know that there are a whole bunch of people, right, who are going to be fine because the system was built for them to be fine. But there are a whole bunch of people who are not going to be. And it's our job. That is where we as government step in.
Thank you for a very honest answer.
Always.
Always. Always. Also, you highlighted a lot of goals and achievements that the county has has been able to have wins. However, we know there is a lot more work we should be doing. So what is front and center and in your mind these days, and what keeps you up at night?
You know, what's front and center for me for Prince George's County, there's a couple of things. One, I would say, from an economic development perspective as a whole, and this is inclusive of housing, but also in other efforts throughout our cluster, there are barriers to the kind of progress that we want to see in the county that you don't necessarily see in every jurisdiction around the region. There are, I think, reasons why, for example, the areas around our metro stations in Prince George's County, the development potential has not been realized in the way that it has in other places. I think we have infrastructure issues that you don't see everywhere, and they are expensive and often prohibitive. And then I think we have marketing issues that you don't have everywhere else in the region. And so part of what keeps me up at night is figuring out how to position our tools and capacities in the county so that we can set these areas up for our nonprofits, other members of the private sector, to come in and start to deliver the kind of housing, amenities, jobs that we want to see. But part of that, I think, for Prince George's is taking some investment on our part to set the stage. From an affordable housing specifically perspective, what keeps me up at night is, we're starting to build this toolkit that is more robust. We are starting to build resources, put resources into this that are more robust. But part of what we're doing on the other side with doing infrastructure improvements and marketing the county better is actively leading to growth that starts to make that affordable housing side more difficult. And I think we probably are going to find ourselves in a couple of years at a tipping point where, we have to figure out, are we really going to plow more resources into this and get in front of or try to mitigate the effects of the growth that we already see happening? And that is a fine balance. And we know from other jurisdictions around the region and also around the country that everybody hasn't caught that balance in the right place between growth and making sure that everybody can participate in that growth. And so that's what keeps me up at night at this point. Are we putting enough resources in to things like affordable housing, those mitigating forces that will help us to make sure that a wide range of households can participate in the growth that's happening, and will we catch it before it gets away from us?
Thank you. And that's a great segue to our next presentation. So we will invite Latoya Thomas to talk to us about HandsHit tool. Thank you very much. And again, I want to remind everybody, please continue putting your questions in the Q&A, and we will take questions at the very end again.
All right, good afternoon again, everyone. Again, I'm Latoya Thomas with Brick and Story. I'm here today to give an overview of the housing indicator tool, which some of you may be familiar with. But if you're not, this will be a primer for you, and then to also do a brief demo of the tool. Later in the presentation, I'll be joined by Leah Hindi from the Urban Institute for Q&A. So if there's any particular questions that come up, particularly around the data, Leah and I will be able to tag team on those questions. Next slide. Just a quick background on HAND, if you're not familiar. So HAND is one of my clients, and I've worked with them for the last now going on 3 years, specifically on the housing indicator tool. HAND is a nonprofit membership organization with over 450 private, public, and social sector members, representing the wide range of the affordable housing industry. So that includes developers, architects, general contractors, lenders, bankers, and all of the related consultants that go with that, with the industry. And its reach is not just the DC metro area, but also Baltimore and Richmond. And through the work of HAND, they've been really focused on centering racial equity in the organization's operations and practices. And you'll see that evident through the housing indicator tool in particular. Also focusing how to leverage its voice for advocacy efforts, which has been new for HAND in the last several years. And really trying to help the industry understand how to do this line of work, how to do affordable housing differently in a more impactful and meaningful way. In addition to its trainings, which HAND is very well known for, it's really focused on how do we move members to the next level so that we can really start to solve for our affordable housing issues across the region. Next slide. So again, I presume most folks who are listening in today are in the housing space, but we often use this just to level set everyone to the conversation around the tool itself. And that's defining affordable housing, which, going by HUD's definition, is housing that in which the occupant is paying no more than 30% of their gross income on their housing cost, and that includes their utility expenses. Next slide. So as we talk about the HIT, we'll give some just background for framing for how we actually got to this tool. So in 2019, the Urban Institute completed a report that looked at population forecast and growth forecast. And based on their analysis, they projected a need of 374,000 net new housing units by 2030. And then of that 374,000, almost 80% of those units need to be affordable to low and middle income households. Subsequently, the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, or the COG, adopted targets based on Urban's forecast. And those regional targets basically have set the stage for the development of the housing indicator tool. And in 2019, we actually started collecting data for the launch of the housing indicator tool, which is really a digital representation of these targets. Next slide. So you're seeing a few screenshots of the tool here. I'm going to apologize if you hear a squeaky toy in the background, by the way. There is a puppy in the background. The housing indicator tool is an accountability tool first and foremost. For those of you who are not familiar, the tool is updated annually. We issue a survey to all of the housing directors once a year, usually around this time, to complete information and respond to questions around their production data, their production goals, their policies, their programs, and really what's part of their housing toolkit. And then that gets conveyed in the annual update to the digital tool itself. In addition to that accountability tool, we also try to make a link between housing and racial equity, as well as focus on how the different sectors of the industry can be moved to action to affect housing affordability issues in the ways that are unique for their industries. Next slide. So who is impacted by housing affordability? Next slide. This has been a big part of what we've looked at with the evolution of the housing indicator tool. Sorry, next slide, Jose. Thank you. One of the big challenges that I know HAND has experienced, and I think that probably many of you who work in this space have experienced, is trying to explain who is really impacted by housing affordability. So as part of our exercise, particularly with this, with the 2022 release of the tool earlier this year, we've really tried to equate this idea of wage and profession and earnings with monthly housing cost and with housing cost burden and what that means. The whole goal here is to really show that there's a wide range of people that are affected by housing affordability issues, probably people that you know, friends, family, neighbors, folks who you on the surface might think make very good money, and probably just looking at the number, it looks like a great salary. But then when you start to compare that against what the actual cost is to have housing on a regular basis, you start to find that a lot of those folks are struggling to keep up with their housing costs. And obviously for lower income families and individuals, if something happens, a job loss, a health scare, that one little thing could make them completely housing unstable. Next slide. This is a screenshot of our interactive tool that we introduced into the HIT this year, really thinking about this question of who can afford to live here. And again, trying to communicate more effectively how many people are impacted by housing affordability. It crosses demographic lines, and lines of race, lines of class, jobs, family size, family status. And so again, trying to make this idea more accessible, particularly for folks who are not necessarily in the housing space, and trying to understand, why should I care about affordable housing issues? Next slide. Again, coming back to this theme of calls to action, what role do we each play in furthering housing affordability? We see roles for everyone in the space. Even though the Housing Indicator Tool annual survey goes to the housing directors, housing affordability is not just a public sector problem, it's an everyone problem. Next slide. So we talk about these different groups that make up the housing ecosystem. The public sector, obviously, they are the ones leading the way around policies, particularly around production and preservation. So how are they leveraging their toolkit? What's missing from the toolkit? But then we also look at the nonprofits. How can nonprofit organizational missions be aligned with production and provision of services, particularly at the deepest levels of affordability? For the private sector, how do we look at corporations, particularly large corporations, large industries that might be bringing a wide range of jobs to a region? How do they consider the location of jobs, the wages, and even direct investment in housing? Philanthropy. How do we think about challenging philanthropy to deploy their dollars differently? How do we think about shifting philanthropic investments into housing production? And then last but not least, advocacy in the broader community. How do we empower the advocacy community and residents to have the accurate information around policy, around programs, and around challenges in order to effectively advocate to leadership? Next slide. So with that, we are now going to go just through a quick demo of the tool itself. So your screen is going to change in a moment to the landing page for the Housing Indicator Tool. Thank you. So just a quick run through of the tool. This is our current landing page for this year's theme. We focused on 374,000 and the path to achieve equity across the region and housing. The page opens up with some background, again, around how the Housing Indicator Tool itself came to be, the Urban Institute targets, and then some of the key areas that we talk about, particularly around policies, practices. This particular section is looking at a lot of the historic land use policies and policies around segregation, around redlining, but also around practices, how we've seen a disinvestment in Black and Brown communities over several decades, and how that has led to the housing crisis that we have right now, how that's led to the housing disparities that we see, particularly across lines of race, and how that's even led to the racial wealth gap, particularly between Black and white households. And again, as shown during the presentation, we talk about who can afford to live here. This interactive tool allows you to move the slider to see who becomes housing insecure as monthly housing costs go up. And on each card, you can flip the card to actually see information about that individual, their family status, their annual income, and their monthly housing costs. Again, as we go down, policies and investments. So the tool has been focused on the different policies that make up the housing toolkit, as we like to call it. We've grouped those by preserve, produce, and protect. And so each year we take a look at these tools and we compare them to what each jurisdiction has to understand what each jurisdiction is or is not leveraging in their housing toolkit. We have the links for all of the jurisdictional dashboards, which we'll come back to when we'll go to the Prince George's County dashboard. If you can go to the top of the dashboard there, Jose, thank you. The rest of the landing page also just has links to resources and calls to action as well. Looking at the Prince George's County dashboard as an example, all of the dashboards for the jurisdictions are set up the same way. We have fast facts about each jurisdiction, including population, household size, or number of households, renter cost burden information, whether or not the jurisdiction has adopted the COG targets, and how they did towards meeting their annual production targets. So we scroll down, those policy status that I mentioned on the landing page, preserve, produce, protect, and all of the sub policies that fall under that. You can see either a red X or a green check mark to indicate if the jurisdiction has that policy in place. The housing outcomes information is really the core of what we're getting from the survey data. The charts to really pay attention to are the housing cost by lowest, low and moderate incomes to really understand where is production happening, where is production not happening. And across most of the jurisdictions that have participated in the tool, we're seeing more production happening at over 50% AMI, less happening below 50% AMI. And we know that's where the greatest need is. Again, as we go down, we have charts specifically focused on structural racism. And so that looks at income across lines of race, home ownership rates, home buying ability, credit denials, and housing cost burden, again, by race. We also look at housing context. And so change in household income, change in supply of housing over time. Again, some common themes, you'll probably see a loss of households at those lower income bands. We look at general household income and how that's been trending. We also look at homeowner supply and affordable home buying ability. Last but not least, the HIT is an advocacy tool. So for each jurisdiction, you have the elected officials with names, phone numbers, and email addresses for your convenience, along with housing officials, which may include the housing directors, planning directors, and then where applicable, we also include contact information for the equity officers. The last thing I will say before I close out is that I mentioned we go through an annual update every year. We are currently well underway with our Housing Indicator Tool 3.0 update, which we will be unveiling in mid-March of 2023. The housing directors have started to receive the survey from our partners at Urban. And so they will be completing that survey between now and late January. And in the meantime, we are working in the background to actually update and enhance the current tool. So in March, you'll see some new features, some new elements, and some new areas that we're trying to focus on with the release of the tool this year as well. So again, thank you for your time today, and I will be on for questions later in the afternoon. Thanks.
Thanks, Jose. Could you put this onto full? Thank you. Good afternoon again. I'm Melissa with Enterprise. Thanks, LaToya, for that fantastic presentation. What I'm going to talk about now is some of the work that's been ongoing here in Prince George's County related to looking at the needs in housing, data and analysis, specifically for the county, as LaToya mentioned, and then what are some actions that Prince George's County could be taking and is taking to address them. Next slide, please. So this all begins with what's been alluded to by DCO Rogers and others, the Housing Opportunity for All initiative. The county approved, and Enterprise was privileged to help support the development of a 10-year comprehensive housing strategy known as Housing Opportunity for All in order to meet the housing needs of Prince George's County residents, both those who are here now and planning for the future, while also ensuring that we were producing more equitable outcomes in terms of who benefits, where housing is located, and other items we'll talk about here in a moment. The goal of the comprehensive housing strategy was to build both the county and other sectors' capacity to help implement the recommendations in the plan. And then also to look at solutions, new and expanded tools that could help to address specific needs and different kinds of housing needs. In addition to producing the report so that it didn't just sit on a shelf after its completion, the County Council established a HOFA working group, a Housing Opportunities for All working group of community participants, agency directors, and others to dive deeper on what implementation should look like and then what actions could be taken to actually meet those needs. Next slide, please. As a quick refresher, the Housing Opportunity for All initiative is designed to achieve 3 goals: to support existing residents and recognizing their diverse needs, to attract new residents of all kinds, including practitioners, to help meet those needs and to enjoy the benefits of living in Prince George's County. And then to take advantage of the strengths inherent in Prince George's County, both at the market level and at the community level, to look at how to do investments that could better achieve some of those goals. They relate to things like where we develop, as DCO Rogers mentioned, as well as other federal, state, and local programs that are overlaid that could help to meet goals even more effectively. Next slide, please. The following trends have been identified in Prince George's County that relate specifically to core housing needs. One is demographic changes, which is that as a county, we are aging. We have more seniors, more folks who have lived here for a long time, as well as those who are moving into the county. And then looking at both a trend toward both smaller households and larger households, needing more bedrooms or needing smaller space. We also noted that we have limited housing diversity. And what that means is the types of housing that's available. There's a lot of single family detached housing, and there are large multifamily buildings, but not a lot in between. We also looked at the fact that Prince George's County is not a monolith. The conditions for housing, both the amounts, the types, the costs, et cetera, are different in different parts of the county. So a one-size-fits-all approach may not actually be tailored appropriately to local conditions and needs in various parts of Prince George's. We looked at housing quality and conditions, including aging infrastructure, as was mentioned earlier. And we looked at the challenges of housing affordability, including the number of members of our workforce who make very different salaries, but all of whom are needed in order for everyone in Prince George's County to meet their daily needs, as well as looking at populations with special needs, and of course, prioritizing racial inequities and trying to address specifically needs for households of color. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about data. I'm going to go quickly through this, though the data is important. I believe that the slides will be made available for folks who want to take a look. But we did some comparisons from the 2000 census to the most recent data we had available at the time of our analysis in 2019 to look at how many people live in households in Prince George's County. And you'll see different colored bands that relate to one-person households, two-person households, et cetera, as you go from left to right on the left-hand side of this graph. And there haven't been wild swings from 2000 to 2019, except when you look at the number of one-person households. That number has increased quite a bit relative to the others in the last 20 years. If you look on the right-hand side, we looked at the number of bedrooms in existing housing units in Prince George's to see how well the supply, the type of housing correlates to the household sizes that we're seeing since 2000 in 2019. And spoiler alert, you'll see that we have a lot more housing typologies in different areas than where we're seeing the most growth in terms of residents moving in. So that helped us understand that we need to offer more diverse types of housing in order to meet all the different needs of our current and ongoing future residents. Next slide, please. To kind of put a finer point on this, what this complicated graph shows is that from 2000 to 2019, a single unit detached, also known as a single family home, was by far the largest typology in Prince George's County. In 2019, single family homes constituted more than half of all housing in Prince George's County. And then you see the degree to which other forms or typologies of housing are kind of evolving over time. Another thing I want to point out in this particular graph is that at the bottom where it says the total number of housing structure, from the year 2000 to 2019, we only added from 302,000 to 333,000 total units over 2 decades. That might sound like a lot in a vacuum, but compared to our population growth and its various needs, including the affordability and typology and location, we are not doing a great job in Prince George's or across the region in actually increasing housing supply to address current and future residents for Prince George's. Next slide, please. This is a quick graph. Sorry that it's only on one half of the slide, but it shows generally where housing that's been built in the last 20 years is located. And the deeper rich reds and burgundy colors that you see indicate higher degrees of a kind of proportion of the housing that's been built since 2000. And this is just to show that, consistent with building more single family homes than, say, other typologies, those single family homes or any kinds of housing have been largely built outside the Beltway, kind of away from our metro stations and disproportionately across the county. So just wanted to acknowledge that that is what the data is showing us. Next slide, please. We also talked about housing quality, housing conditions, and we have a graph here that shows on the left-hand side the number of households reporting a challenge relating to their existing housing conditions and or their affordability. And the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the federal HUD, actually has definitions for housing conditions and affordability. They're located at the bottom left of the slide. And we found that from 2000 to 2017, the most recent time we had available, that there were increases in the numbers of reported housing problems in Prince George's County. That's consistent. Housing stock gets older over time, more challenges are likely to show up. This graph also shows on the right-hand side that those households that experience cost burden, that is, they are paying at least 30 and sometimes more than 50% of their income as severely cost burdened households, were reporting the vast majority of housing problems. So there is a correlation between the affordability of housing stock and the chances that a household living in that affordable housing stock is experiencing an infrastructure or other housing quality condition challenge. So if we can help to address the health of our housing stock, especially for those at lower incomes, we will also increase and enhance their quality of life. Next slide, please. I also wanted to acknowledge, this is a study that we did that looked at the Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia market, and then other adjacent suburban Maryland County markets that relate to rental costs. How much have rents changed in a 5-year period, going from 2014 to 2019, the most recent data we had at the time? What's interesting about this graph is that it shows that in almost every case across Maryland jurisdictions and the District of Columbia, rents have increased over 5 years. That's probably not a headline. Most people probably are aware of that or expect that. What is notable is how much Prince George's rent has increased across median in that 5-year time. It has increased by almost 7.5%. And that's not taking the pandemic into account, where we've seen rents fluctuate even more. This is notable because compared to its peers, only the District of Columbia has had a higher jump in the rent costs over 5 years. I don't have a slide here showing how flat incomes have been over the last 5 years, both in Prince George's County, all of these jurisdictions, and the nation as a whole. But what we are showing is that Prince George's County is getting much more expensive to rent relative to its peers. And that relates to the economic competitiveness of Prince George's County and the ability of residents who want to stay in Prince George's County to do so when neighboring jurisdictions may be not experiencing rent quite so sharply increasing. Next slide, please. So I mentioned at the beginning that the Housing Opportunity for All Comprehensive Housing Strategy was published. Upon its completion, to make sure it didn't stay on a shelf, the administration and county council convened a Housing Opportunities for All working group, a cross-sector group of constituents, participants, housing related experts, practitioners, and others to help look meaningfully at how to measure progress on meeting the goals in the HOFA, and then also tracking what specific priorities that they wanted to pursue in any given year. Next slide, please. The good news is that over its tenure, which extended to 3 years because of the pandemic, The HOFA implementation has been really outstanding. There's been a lot of momentum and a lot of meaningful change made since the working group was convened. This shows kind of an overarching kind of summary of what's been accomplished, but let's talk about them in a little bit more detail. Next slide. Key accomplishments here, you'll see that there are some numbers, but I want to just talk about what those numbers can help for all residents and all kind of constituencies to understand about the work. The first is there was a tremendous amount of community engagement that was done on thinking through what are the priorities that come out of the comprehensive housing strategy, and then what are the annual priorities that we should take into account to implement. So that included a lot of proactive dialogue during the complicated challenges of being in a pandemic for a large part of that work. The Housing Opportunities for All Working Group also produced annual reports that are our measure of accountability on the constructiveness and kind of the clear prioritization on what to work on in any given year coming out of the report, and then meaningfully what accomplishments have been made, so that they're not just talking about the problem, we're not just celebrating the problem, we're actually doing work on it. And that measurement, accountability, transparency, and reporting back on an annual basis, I think, is really a strength of the work that's been done. We achieved more resources for helping to address housing affordability needs. You'll see across the bottom there, additional money for the right of first refusal program, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Additional dedicated funding for the Housing Trust Fund, which is the most flexible source of capital available for housing preservation and housing production and affordability. And then also increasing community navigators, resources to help connect families and individuals to programs. So there's a lot to be proud of in terms of the work that's been done. Next slide, please. So there were 8 actions that came out of the comprehensive housing strategy that the HOFA work group said, this is where we need to lean in. And you'll see here on the left some of the highlights. There was a lot of interest in strengthening the rights and responsibilities for tenants and landlords. Certainly that was exacerbated by the pandemic and reactions to and experiences from the pandemic, but this is something that's true in jurisdictions across the region. So we're really glad to see that that take a kind of a priority over the work of the HOFA. We also looked at trying to understand the role that inclusionary housing could play, committing that in any new building that there might be more committed housing affordability units, for example. Looking at things like universal design, making sure that we have fully accessible and tailored accessibility opportunities for those who rely on them, from both our seniors and for those who may have specific design needs in their housing. We also care a lot about acknowledging the changing demographics of the county while also building staff in a position to be able to address folks who may have a language barrier or who may have other specialized needs that the county should be in a position to support. We also wanted to look, as I said, at the Housing Investment Trust Fund, right of first refusal, the preservation program, as well as additional resources for households experiencing crisis. And then there's additional work that's been done on a housing program called land banking, which would look at how to bring more residential properties that are currently out of service and not supporting households to do so. Next slide. I mentioned that $15 million was dedicated for the right of first refusal program. This is a really remarkable plan. Some of this money came from the feds and is intended to help support preserving and improving housing quality while also maintaining housing affordability and a mix of incomes in multiple locations across the county. I do a lot of work on the Purple Line, and Prince George's has been a really active and strong member of the Purple Line Corridor Coalition, where some of these right of first refusal deals have happened and they make a big difference. Next slide. I mentioned the $10 million for the Housing Production Trust Fund. This really relates to new housing supply, which we know we need. Since that $10 million in dedicated funding has been approved for every year, we've been able to support more developments, as Angie said. This is the way we do business now, and have had, I think it's even more than 1,000 new units at this point that have been approved. Next slide, please. Recommendations. The last year of the HOFA working group was this year. I'll go through these very quickly. Next slide. As part of their last year of priorities, we were informed by the County Executive's Economic Development Platform, which DCO Rogers mentioned, as well as specific goals for the county as a whole, trying to add production by 2030, ensuring more of those units are committed, affordable for the long term, recognizing that we need housing at a variety of income levels. And so it says up to 120% AMI, but also includes a lot of consideration for those making much less than that. Location, where and how will we grow? Where and how do people need housing? What do they need it connected to, from transportation to health and other daily needs? And then acknowledging housing typology matters. We can't single family home construct our way into the kinds of equitable and affordable outcomes across the county. We are going to have to look at additional ways to meet housing needs. Next slide. So the issues that Housing Opportunities for All work group mentioned that they thought were most important were acknowledging tenure. That is a split, that we have to have rental solutions and we need affordable homeownership solutions. Also acknowledging price point, the income bands. We need to serve people at a lot of different incomes to meet their housing needs. Location, where and how will we grow? How do we take advantage of transit infrastructure and other infrastructure to make sure that everyone has access to the specific kinds of amenities that they need to meet their daily goals? And then finally, type, which is really looking at what is the housing diversity, what is the housing typology that we need. Next slide. So here you'll see that some of the recommendations are about increasing production and also making sure that we are investing both at the public level and also with our private sector partners in order to fund production, making sure that we are not neglecting those at lower incomes, much lower than 120% AMI, in order to meet needs. A lot of folks who work in Prince George's County are making far less than 120% of AMI, looking at homeownership and looking at affordable homeownership tied to transit. Next slide, please.
Definitely. Because I'm seeing that those documents are missing from the folders completely. Yeah.
Alexis, I think you might need to be on mute.
Applications where, I guess when they did the coding on the back end, when you make a change.
Thanks.
Oh,
We can go
I'm
to the next
sorry.
slide. Thank you. So we're looking at expanding our resources, both for production through the trust fund and preservation through right of first refusal. Let's go to the next slide. I know we're running late. Thank you. We're also, the HAFA also recommended looking at exploring land use and zoning, process improvements, access to home ownership. Go ahead, next slide. And then also looking at the creation of two different kinds of advisory boards. One focused on housing policy, housing goals, targets, and implementation. Next one, next slide, this is the last one. And then also one looking at the roles of tenants and landlords and the ways that the tenant-landlord relationships can work better alongside everyone understanding what their roles are, their rights, and their responsibilities. So we've covered a lot of ground. I want to thank you for the additional time. And that's been a really very concise presentation on a lot of work that's been done by the Housing Opportunities for All work group. Thank you so much.
All right, well, good afternoon again, everybody. My name is John Manival. I'm gonna spend a few minutes here drilling into one tool that the county has been working on over the last 2 years or so to enhance and achieve some of the goals that Melissa outlined under HOFA and the DCAO Rogers mentioned. This is just one tool in the housing toolkit, but it's exemplified the county's commitment to achieving its goals. Next slide, please. The program is called Right of First Refusal, and it actually has been on the county's books since 2013. And under the context of the HOFA working group several years ago, it was prioritized as a tool to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing. And as Melissa indicated, and DCAO Rogers indicated, there's been in recent years significant increases in rents in Prince George's County. So the timing for rolling out right of first refusal was really quite good. And the hope is that under this program in the years ahead, significant number of units can be income and rent restricted for years to come, so that housing affordability is maintained for as many Prince George's County residents as possible. The program is overseen by DHCD. Essentially how the program works is the county has the right to purchase a multifamily property that comes up for sale. Owners of properties are obligated to notify the county when they're planning to sell a property. And if the county can figure out how to match the price and assign their rights to an affordable housing developer, it can intervene in that transaction, have the property purchased at the original contract price and preserved as affordable housing. The county created a programmatic structure to be able to do this in a very rapid manner. The county code is very specific about timetables, and it only succeeds if the county can meet those timetables. And for those of you who have more interest in learning about the details of the program, the regulations and the affordable housing developers who are active in the program and some of the county incentives aligned with it, which I'll briefly mention, you can go to the website. Next slide, please. So what's happened? Well, in the last 2 years since the program was relaunched, the county's been quite successful in using this tool to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing. A total of 55 different properties have come across the county's desk for review, representing over 15,000 units of rental housing in the county. The county has exercised its right or provided an exception to its right of first refusal for 30 of those properties, with 8,336 units. And then this is the important number, Melissa mentioned it, a total of 6 properties with 2,144 units total, with 1,213 of those units restricted for affordability have been preserved under the ROFR program. So what that means is the properties that are being restricted are mixed income properties with a mixture of market rate and rent and income restricted units. They tend to be larger properties, which is very commonplace in Prince George's County from a standpoint of unit count. And they are restricted. The income and rent restricted units are restricted for at least 15 years, with the hope of those income restriction periods being extended at some point through a broader recapitalization effort. Next slide, please. If we drill into those 1,213 units to date, and these numbers do update as new transactions move through the program, but it's a good marker for where we are at this point. You have most of the units being restricted at 60% of area median income. Earlier, it was mentioned some of the higher AMI targeting. This is a program focused on naturally occurring affordable housing. So as expected, the income and rent targets that are achievable under this program are significantly lower. That's about 81% of the units, and the rest of the units are at 50, 70, and 80% of area median. So a 60% AMI household is somebody whose income is up to $59,000 as a single person household, and up to $77,000 or so for a 3-person household. This is something that was being talked about earlier. Where can people find a place that's affordable to them based on their household composition and the kind of job they have? Preserving naturally occurring affordable housing, like under the ROFR program, really creates a stable, affordable place for somebody to live for a long time, which is a really important goal of the county. Next slide, please. Drilling a little bit more into these 12,000 units, it was always expected in rolling out this program that the county would not result in acquiring every single property that comes for sale, that it would be much more targeted in its efforts, and it focuses in areas where the county thinks affordable housing is well suited for places that are near transit, jobs, schools, and the like. So there's a targeting mechanism that goes on by the county. And what you'll see is in almost half of the cases, the county chose not to exercise its right of first refusal. And in those cases where it did exercise its right of first refusal, it took a closer look, consulted with, potential affordable housing developers, and passed on it. So it was just those two smaller pieces of the pie that represent the outcomes of the program. But those are significant numbers in a relatively short period of time. So if we sort of extrapolate those numbers forward 5-10 years into the future, you can imagine the program could result in a significant inventory of naturally occurring affordable housing. Next slide, please. So what's going on with the program? The county has really taken great efforts to help make the program succeed within the context of how it works. It does have a roster of affordable housing developers it works with under the program. It's made greater use of the exception provisions under the code to provide potential buyers of properties with an opportunity to proffer affordability ahead of time so that the county can get the affordability it is looking for, and buyers can get the certainty that when they enter into a contract to sale, they're not going to be displaced under the right of first refusal program. That's sort of a win-win for the county. And as mentioned earlier by Melissa, the county has provided significant financing to support the program to help energize transactions to move forward through a $15 million commitment under the American Rescue Plan Act. The first loan under that tranche of funding closed last month, Bedford and Victoria Station. There's another tranche of funding that the county advocated for and received from the state of Maryland in the last legislative session that should be available very soon, another $10 million to help enhance and expand the impact of that loan fund. So that's a really important milestone for the county from the standpoint of county aligning its incentives to support this program. Next slide, please. And similarly, the county has made very creative use of its ability to offer up real estate tax abatements to property owners under this program, so that by making tactical strategic reductions in real estate taxes due on a property, the county can incentivize deeper affordability for longer periods of time under this program. The first thing they did was make sure the state law allowed them to provide pilots to right of first refusal properties. That was taken care of in 2021. And then earlier this year, the county agreed to provide DHCD with the ability to provide pilots by providing notice to county council, but not requiring legislation and an extended period of consideration, so that the pilots could move at the same speed as the transactions under right of first refusal. So aligning these county financing tools with the goals of the right of first refusal program have really helped the program maintain its pace of production of income and rent restricted units. And the county is very hopeful that looking into the future, that pace will continue, and is very happy with the outcomes of the program to date. Next slide, I believe, is my final slide. Yeah, thank you very, very much. Been happy to talk to you about the right of first refusal program today.
Good afternoon again, my name is Pam Wilson, and I serve as the Chief Housing Development Manager for the Department of Housing. And I'd like to give you some updates on where the department is with some of its multifamily production programs and goals and outcomes. So that's what my next few slides will be about. So take me to the next slide, Jose. So earlier, you heard our DCAO, Angie Rogers, speak about the county executive's affordable housing production goals. And then I think Melissa even reiterated them again. And now you see I have them on my slide as well. it's important because these goals serve as a North Star for DHCD. It gives the department a vision. We have a vision, we know what is expected, and it allows us to plan a strategy for achieving annual performance benchmarks so we can meet these goals by the year 2030. It really sets the stage as we communicate with our federal, state, and local partners on attracting additional resources to achieve the goals. Also highlighted on this slide is the Sovereign West Hyattsville project, which is slated to begin construction this month. And when completed, it'll produce 293 new rental units in the county, of which half of them will be committed as affordable housing. Next one. So what are the county's resources in our toolbox to support the production of affordable multifamily rental housing? Well, the department has 3 resources. It provides subordinate debt gap financing from 2 funding sources. The first one here is the Home Investment Partnership Program. The county receives an annual allocation of home funds from HUD, and we get about $3 million and earn another $1 million in program income annually for this source of financing. And then the second, and I should mention the county will also be receiving a future allocation of home funds associated with the American Rescue Plan Act. We're expecting to receive about $7.6 million in funds in next year, and these funds will support the production of housing for the county's most vulnerable populations. And more details will come about that once HUD approves the county's home ARP allocation plan. The second pot of money is our Housing Investment Trust Fund. And Melissa mentioned this as because it was really the HAFA work group that helped to push this along. And in 2021, the county council enacted a bill which dedicated a permanent financing source to this fund. At a minimum, the fund will be capitalized in the annual amount of at least $10 million. And then you heard John talk about some money that the county was able to secure to enhance the right of first refusal loan program. Well, the county was also able to secure some funding from the state of Maryland in the amount of $10 million to enhance our trust fund. So we're really excited about that. And the third tool that we have is what we call our pilot program, a payment in lieu of taxes. This is where we're able to leverage these, this is where we can defer county real property taxes on a property in exchange for some affordability. So there's some negotiations that go on, and so we can help relieve the cost of those taxes if the owners will restrict affordability on some of the units at 60% and even 50% and below the area median income. And I think DCA Rogers also mentioned this, we're able to take all of these county resources and leverage them to attract additional outside resources from private and public entities, such as the state of Maryland. I think DCA Rogers also mentioned the newly created Amazon Fund, and there's other public and private lenders out there as well. And I want to point out the 2 projects highlighted on this slide that were recently completed. There's the Lewis, which is in Suitland. It's 137 new units of affordable housing for seniors. And then there's the Gateway at Peerless, which is in Upper Marlboro, and it's 62 units of multifamily rental housing for families, and it's kind of shaped in like a townhouse stacked building. So they're 2 great projects, and they're online now. And so you can go to the next slide. So all the strategies and efforts and resources previously mentioned, they lead to positive outcomes. And this slide just shows how our affordable housing production rate is growing. In the past 4 years, the county has supported over 2,000 new units in various stages of the development process. As you can see, we have some that are recently completed. We have some that are under construction right now, and some projects that we anticipate will start construction over the next 12 months. And some of these projects we've highlighted on the slide just to give you an idea that these are real projects producing real affordable units. And the one highlighted here is the Homes at Oxon Hill project, which is under construction, should be completed next year in 2023. And this project is also a senior project, and I think it's 90 units. This will create 90 units of affordable senior housing. So all these outcomes are achievable due to the leveraging of funds from a variety of sources. Next slide. So what's on the horizon for DHCD? The department is planning to issue a notice of funding availability on December 9th to announce the solicitation of applications for our home funds and trust funds that I just mentioned, as well as pilot requests. All of this to support new construction of affordable rental housing. In addition, the department is going to host a NOFA webinar on December 16th to go over the application requirements. And the NOFA will also include county priorities. And the priorities focus on the production of deeply affordable units. These are units to households that are at and below 50% of the area median income. But we also would like to see mixed use, mixed income developments along the purple line, the blue line corridor that DCO spoke about earlier, and even in other transit locations. That's important. Also excited to announce that DHCD is planning to launch an affordable housing dashboard. We'll be putting this on our website. The dashboard will provide data on the county's affordable housing development production, the preservation, as well as homeownership statistics. And it will track the county's progression in achieving those affordable goals, those numbers that have been mentioned over and over throughout the presentation. So stay tuned for that, but it will be here soon. Next slide. So the next two slides I want to talk about, it's not really about new production of affordable housing, but it's about the preservation of existing home ownership housing. So I want to showcase the county's efforts to preserve existing affordable home ownership for homeowners. The department funds 2 programs to support this effort. The program you see on this slide is the Homeowner Preservation Program. We refer to it as HOP. HOP was launched in November of 2021 and it was a result of some of the COVID relief funding that we received. And we administer this program in partnership with the Habitat for Humanity Metro Maryland. And it provides much needed assistance to low and moderate income homeowners to provide safety, energy efficiency, and accessibility repairs. The program provides grants to homeowners in certain geographic areas with special consideration to households earning below 50% of the area median income. Next slide. So the second program is the county's longstanding Housing Rehabilitation Assistance Program, referred to as HRAP. We have a lot of acronyms. This program also provides the same type of improvements as the HOP program, but the funding is structured a little bit differently. The assistance is provided in the form of zero interest deferred loans. The program is funded with federal funds from our Community Development Block Grant Program. And it is administered in partnership with the Housing Initiative Partnership Group and the county's Redevelopment Authority. And the success and the demand of these programs, it really does, again, allows for the county to advocate and leverage for additional local, state, and federal resources so that we can further support and continue this valuable resource for our county residents. So with that, I think that's my last slide, Jose. Yes, that's my last slide. So hopefully that just gives everyone an update of what's going on with the department. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you to all of our presenters. We do have a few minutes, so I do want to sneak in a few questions. I would like to invite all of our panelists to be on camera. So I'll try to do a couple of questions. There are still many questions on the chat, and we will be getting to you after this. But just for now, Melissa, thank you. You provided a wealth of information. You have been working in the county for years now on the comprehensive housing strategy and the HOFA work. Looking back, if there was a crystal ball, would you do anything different? And have there been any unexpected outcomes in all this work?
Thank you for that question. Two things. I definitely would have used my crystal ball to predict a global pandemic, which nobody saw coming. But one of the very few silver linings from our experience in looking from the HOFA's perspective during the pandemic was really understanding that you can have great plans and great approaches, and the county does, for how to produce and preserve housing, but being able to communicate to residents what's available, what are their rights, what programs do they qualify for, to help landlords understand. We really didn't realize how much of that infrastructure was needed until we faced a crisis. And the pandemic is not over for thousands and thousands of Prince George's residents, as is true for millions across the country. But as a practical matter, a lot of infrastructure was built to help build so that more communication, more education, more resources and support, and connecting more people to what's available is possible. And we could not have predicted that. But as a practical matter, I'm grateful that we're in a position now to be able to lean in on those issues as well.
Thank you. Latoya, from Hans' standpoint, what would you say is the most important benefit of having this HEAT tool at the regional level? And what does Hans see the HEAT tool evolve and be in 5 years from now?
So I think, when we talk about the need for affordable housing, I think it's been very easy for people to say it's someone else's issue. It's not an issue that's happening here. And one of the things that we see in terms of the value of the HIT is the ability to show the reach and the breadth, the scale at which affordability not only affects many different people, many different kinds of people, but also geographically, it doesn't stop just because we've reached the border of a particular city or state or locality. It's like a wave that when you have affordability in one area, we see what happens. We see people get pushed out. We see people make other economic choices in order to access housing and other resources that are in their price point. And so it has a ripple effect across a very, very large area. And we think the housing indicator tool is a way to effectively show what that regional impact is. It's a way to show how what might be happening in DC, or maybe what's happened in DC as an example over the past 20 years in terms of population change, how that's impacted the surrounding jurisdictions and how it's impacting them now. As we think about the next 5 years, we see the tool not just continuing to track production data, because obviously that's core to the targets and core to what we're trying to focus on, but also starting to articulate some of the other key issues around housing affordability. So I know I mentioned earlier the issue around Black homeownership, which is becoming a really central theme, not just in the DMV, but in other regional jurisdictions in this area, because folks know that it's a very core issue, and we've got to think from a policy standpoint about how to deal with it. We're also thinking about issues around environmental sustainability and environmental resiliency, particularly as we look at how that affects housing choices. And so we see the tool, and we see the kind of the next 5 years as being able to expand the footprint of the tool, as being able to think about how, even though we might be looking at some regions that look very different, they're dealing with very similar problems, but then also starting to introduce new topics, new ideas, and possibly new solutions and new ways to start to tackle affordability issues in a more impactful way.
Thank you. And to build a little more on that, Melissa, what are some trends that you see at the local, state, and federal level that we should be thinking about?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to speak very briefly about federal simply because I think it relates to a couple of items in the chat. Two things. One, people talked a lot this year about inflation and felt and experienced inflation. One of the things that the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, the federal agency that tracks inflation, noted was that this fall, we saw that what's called the shelter index, a subset of inflation indicators that all relate to rental and mortgage related housing costs, drove more than half of the inflation experienced by the country. The fact that housing costs continue to rise at a disproportionate level is affecting our economy. That's true in Prince George's County, which is why seeing that combined approach to economic development and housing affordability is so important, because it's real. The impacts are real. So that's one item I wanted to acknowledge for those who may not follow those statistics closely. The second thing I wanted to mention is that the Biden administration has really taken on trying to help address the systemic, inequitable, racially discriminatory practices that affect multiple agencies and systems that are bigger than any of us on this call. Some of those relate to housing financing, mortgages, credit scores, access to housing. And we are monitoring at Enterprise very closely the work of the Biden administration, the work of the Federal Housing Finance Agency that does mortgages, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, on how they are affirmatively working to dismantle racist and systemic discriminatory practices, including credit scores and credit applications, what qualifies someone for a mortgage, housing appraisals, things of that nature. I know that had come up in the chat, and I just wanted to acknowledge that that is something meaningful we are following very closely. Thank you.
Thank you. John, you spoke about the right of first refusal program, great outcomes today, a lot of work to be done. How does the right of first refusal program compare with conventional affordable finance programs and execution models?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that question, Aspasia. The short answer is right of first refusal moves very quickly. Conventional affordable housing financing programs are driven not just by assembling the financing from multiple sources, but also by the land development process. These are things that for good reasons take time. So a traditional affordable housing transaction might take 18 months to 3 years to get from concept to completion. Right of first refusal transactions, the longest they're going to take by law in Prince George's County is 180 days. And most of them take a little bit less than that. So these transactions move very quickly, and they put the county in a position of having to design its programmatic response to it to meet those timetables. Because if it can't meet the timetables, the program's not going to be successful. So it really requires a reorienting of, conventional thinking and program administration to make a program like right of first refusal work.
Great. I want to thank all of you. There are still a lot of questions we're not going to be able to get into today, but I do hope that we will continue staying in touch with all the participants and many more who have an interest. And with that, we're going to leave you with just a video we prepared recently about our housing efforts in the county, and we look forward to our continuous discussions. So Jose, back at you.
Housing opportunities for all defines our vision for Prince George's County. This means quality housing, safe housing, and housing that is affordable. Residents across the county living in suburban, urban, and rural areas face a variety of market conditions. The Department of Housing and Community Development considers all of these factors when making comprehensive housing investments to spur economic opportunities, particularly in transit-oriented development areas. As a region, the Washington metropolitan area faces a severe affordable housing crisis, and Prince George's County is committed to preserving housing affordability and diversifying the county's housing stock by supporting the production of 26,000 new residential units, 75% of which would be committed as affordable to households, supporting the preservation of 6,000 affordable residential units and breaking ground on 10,400 new multifamily units from 2021 to 2030. To meet these goals, DHCD contributes resources from our Housing Investment Trust Fund and federal dollars from our home funds to help finance new construction and rehabilitate existing multifamily properties to create quality, affordable housing. As our county grows and our housing market continues to heat up, we welcome new residents, but also want existing residents who have contributed to this county through the years to maintain their homes without getting priced out. We're using American Rescue Plan dollars and additional money secured from the state of Maryland to supplement the county's right of first refusal program that allows us to exercise or assign our rights to purchase multifamily properties to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing. To assist residents with keeping their homes, the county made investments in the Home Ownership Preservation Program and the Housing Rehabilitation Program, providing qualified homeowners with a healthy and safe environment, as well as energy efficiency and accessibility repairs. Looking for a new home? Eligible first-time homebuyers can use the Pathway to Purchase Home Buyers Assistance Program and receive down payment and closing costs toward their home purchase. Prince George's County is working hard to keep housing affordable. Visit our website and learn about how we can help at hcd.mypgc.us.
Aspasia, just wanted to quickly thank you for your work and leading us today during our session. I put this into the chat as well, but a recording of this webinar will be made available on the DHCD website, as well as all of the materials that were presented. We appreciate everybody for the registration and participation today. You will receive an email with the materials as soon as they are posted, and we appreciate your time this evening or this afternoon. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.